Hi, I'm Drew and welcome to my sewing room. If you're not new here, then you might have seen my video from a couple of weeks ago where I went over my sewing plans for the first couple of weeks of 2021. I showed you all my new vintage patterns and fabrics and really just kind of laid out my process for these first couple of makes of the year. And then I decided to go on vacation, so that threw in some new makes from last week. If you want to check out my vintage vacation makes, I will include a link in the description box below. And then a couple days ago, McCalls dropped their early spring line. These patterns to me really do have a vintage made modern kind of feel. And so I plan to make a few of them, but of course it won't interfere with my normal vintage makes. This video is from McCalls M8175. I fell in love with this dress as soon as I seen it. It's got these really cute cutouts on the side of the stomach, and so I thought, why not just whip it up? It was a really quick, fun make. It took just one day, and so I hope you guys like this. I hope you guys check out McCall's early spring lines. There are really some really cute treasures in there, and so if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe, and if you like this video, and let's get into the sewing. So the first thing I had to do was get all of my pattern pieces printed out and taped together. I will say I've used a lot of digital patterns in the past before, but this one was really weird as far as how it lined up. I had to do a lot of maneuvering and putting some things, I guess, out of place to make others line up. I will say it was not the easiest to line up digital pattern that I've ever used. Now, is this my printer or is this McCall's? I'm not sure, but I will say it was not the easiest process getting this all put together, but I did. And then I chose my fabric, and I'm using this crepe from Mood. I had 3 yards of it. It was in one of my sewing plans videos. I plan to use it for something else, but this is what happens. It's called Panera Fruits on Mood, which basically translates into spilled fruit basket. So this is the fabric I'm using, and it has the patterns going just down the middle of the fabric, and then the ends of the fabric are just like a plain tan. And so I had to really be cautious of where I was placing the pattern pieces so that way the print would show up how I wanted it to. And so once I figured that all out, I proceeded with cutting out the pattern pieces. And step 1 was to reinforce the lower corners of the bodice between the dots and pivoting at the large circles and then clipping into the circles. And then taking pattern piece 1, which is the front, and then the 2 back bodice pieces, which are number 2, and stitching those together at the shoulder and at the underarms and sides. These sleeves are a little interesting as I'm used to set-in sleeves, but I think it's part of the design element that makes the dress lay where you don't need darts. So I got everything pinned in place and took it to the sewing machine. This dress has a lining, and it's my first time doing a lining. Instructions were given for how to line the top, but no instructions were given for how to line the skirt. And I don't know if this was an accident of McCall's or if they assumed that you just know how to do it, but I didn't get to line the skirt, and I do believe it caused some issues for me a little bit later. So my next steps were dealing with the lining for the bodice and the interfacing. So the interfacing pieces 4 and 5 you see here, I had to attach to the bodice front lining and then the 2 bodice back lining pieces. Somehow, some way, I attached the interfacing to the wrong side of one of the lining pieces. I took this off to do it again, and still somehow it ended up on the wrong side. I think I was super confused because this lining was almost the same color as the interfacing, so sometimes it was hard to tell which side it was attached to. And then I got just kind of lazy. I ended up leaving it, and this is a sign of things to come. There was some, I don't know if I want to say laziness when making this or if rushing. I knew that this would be a quick, easy make, and for some reason I wanted it to be even quicker and even easier. And so this is where my issues came in this make. So I stitched the lining together the same way I did the bodice, and then I proceeded with pinning the lining to the bodice all the way around so that way I could stitch it together, leaving the opening between those dots. And so yeah, I pinned it together really well so nothing would shift, and then proceeded with stitching it at the sewing machine. The next thing I did was work on the zipper. This is the first time I've done an invisible zipper. I've done a couple zippers before, but never an invisible zipper. So I got out my invisible zipper foot and stitched it together. Zippers are becoming fairly easy. I'm not sure why I was so intimidated by them at first, but they're not so bad. The only thing that I really cannot figure out, especially with a dress like this where there's an opening in the back, is where exactly to position the zipper so that way it looks decent when it's all said and done. The instructions told me to start down 1/4 of an inch from the top, but I'm not sure if that means where the teeth are or where that zipper tape is. I'm not really sure. So any tips for these zippers, please leave that in the comment box below, because I'll show you at the end how this zipper looked when the dress was all finished. It was this little space at the top that just really I was not happy with, and I just don't really know what to do about that. And so now I am getting started stitching the skirt together. So I got everything lined up, matched up my notches, pinned everything in place, and you can kind of see here how it's taken, the shape that will be around the waist for those cutouts. So I did this and took it to the sewing machine. When I was making this dress, like I said before, I believe I was just kind of rushing through the process just because it was such, I knew, an easy thing to make, and it wasn't really in my plan, so I wanted to get it done so I could kind of move on to some of the things that I had planned. And I think I might have got a little cocky with not reading the instructions because I just assumed it was so easy to make. And so here I am working with the facings that's going to go around the waist of the dress. So the problem was, I stitched this together and then stitched it to the skirt. And I did that before I attached the skirt to the bodice, which was a big no-no. And I was unable to undo this and do it correctly because after I attached it to the waist of the dress, I, of course, trimmed down my seams and then I understitched it so that it wouldn't shift and move. And so it would have just been a nightmare to try to take out all of those stitches from attaching it as well as from understitching it. So I just didn't even bother. And this was really only a cosmetic issue for the inside, but it just made me very unhappy. So I went on ahead and attached the bodice to the skirt, and this is what it looks like in the inside since I put the facing on too soon. But this really wasn't a big deal. This is the zipper. This is what became a big deal because it does not reach the top, and I believe the facing would have, well, no, the facing was already on there. I don't know what would have fixed this, but yeah, this was really horrible. And so I worked at it a little bit and tried to make it as neat as I possibly could, but yeah, that happened. So any tips for how to make that not happen, please feel free to leave. So after cleaning it up a little bit, the dress is pretty much done. I need to put a hook and eye right there to close up the top because the back is left open. And then I need to, well, the instructions say to slip stitch the lining and the sleeves together, and I ended up just top stitching them because I don't really mind the look of a top stitch, but it was a bad idea because it made the sleeves look a little wavy, and then they wanted you to do the same for the lining of the skirt and the hem, but since I didn't have a lining, I just hemmed it, and that made the hem on the skirt look a little wavy. So yes, this is the dress. Those are my mistakes. It was quick. I'm mad that I used my good fabric. This is why I normally always start with those inexpensive quilting cottons before I just go off on fabric that I really love. But the dress is still super cute and it's super well wearable, and especially for a couple of hours. And I think only those of us who sew will really notice the mistakes. So yeah, this is the dress. It was cool, and I look forward to making more of the McCalls early spring collection, and I look forward to making videos for you. So stay tuned for those that are soon and sure to come.